The man walked slowly down the empty street, his worn shoes tapping against the cracked pavement. His coat was old and frayed at the edges, and the cold wind pushed against him, making him pull it tighter around his shoulders. He had been working all day, but the money he earned barely covered rent and bills. His stomach growled quietly, reminding him that he had skipped lunch to save a little for his child's school lunch tomorrow. Life had been hard for a long time, and some nights it felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. He glanced at the corner near the closed diner and saw a figure huddled under a thin blanket. At first, he thought it was just another homeless person trying to stay warm, someone invisible to most people. But when he got closer, he realized it was a teenage girl, shivering and holding a small backpack tightly. Her eyes looked tired and scared, and there was a sadness in her face that made his heart ache. She looked like she had been out in the cold for hours, maybe days. For a moment, he hesitated. He didn't have much, and he was tired himself. But something inside him told him to stop and do something. He remembered the mornings when he had no one to talk to, the nights when he worried about how he would feed his child, and the days when even a small act of kindness could make the world feel a little less heavy. He knew what it was like to feel invisible, to feel like no one cared. He crouched down a little, keeping his voice soft. "Are you okay?" he asked. She looked up at him, startled, and didn't say anything at first. Her lips were blue from the cold, and her hands shook as she clutched the blanket closer to her body. "I'm just cold," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. He nodded slowly, understanding more than words could say. "I know it's cold out. Do you want to eat something?" "I have a sandwich." "Not much, but it's something." The girl blinked at him, unsure if she should trust him. Most people ignored her or walked past without a glance. Some even scolded her for being on the street. But there was something in his eyes, a gentle honesty that made her pause. Slowly she nodded, and he offered her half of the sandwich he had bought for himself. He broke it in two, careful not to make her feel embarrassed or ashamed. They sat together on the curb, eating quietly. The street was empty except for the occasional car passing by, its headlights briefly illuminating them. She ate slowly, taking small bites, while he watched her carefully, making sure she was okay. He didn't ask questions yet. Sometimes the best thing you could do for someone who had nothing was just to be there, quietly sharing what little you had. After a while, she looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. There was a hint of relief there, a small spark of hope that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," she said softly. "Most people don't even notice me." He smiled gently, shaking his head. "I noticed you, and I think it's important to notice each other. Everyone deserves a little kindness, even on the worst days." They talked quietly as they finished the sandwich. He learned a little about her, just enough to know she didn't have a home and that she was alone. She didn't share much else, and he didn't push. He knew some stories were too heavy to tell right away. Instead, he shared little pieces of his own life, stories about his child, and the small victories and struggles of each day. She listened, her shoulders relaxing slightly, her eyes less guarded. After the meal, he noticed that her hands were still cold, and he took off his coat, offering it to her. She hesitated, unsure if she should accept, but he insisted. "It's not much, but it will keep you warmer tonight," he said. She wrapped it around herself, and for the first time in days, she looked comfortable. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. They sat in silence for a few more minutes, neither wanting to leave the warmth of the small connection they had just shared. Finally, he stood up, brushing the dirt off his pants. "You should stay safe tonight," he said. "There are people who care, even when it doesn't feel like it." She nodded, still holding the coat close around her. "I will. Thank you for everything." He gave her a small wave and walked away, his heart heavy but lighter at the same time. He didn't know her story, and she didn't know his. But in that small moment, two lonely lives had crossed paths in a meaningful way. The world could be cruel and unforgiving, but it could also hold small miracles of kindness. Quiet moments where people truly saw each other. As he walked home, he thought about his child waiting for him, wondering if tonight's dinner would be enough, worrying about the bills he hadn't yet paid. Life was still hard, and the road ahead seemed long and uncertain. But he felt a strange sense of hope. Maybe the world wasn't completely lost. Maybe there were moments like this that reminded people why it was worth keeping faith, why it was worth continuing to try, even when everything felt impossible. Meanwhile, the girl stayed under the streetlight, wrapped in the coat, feeling warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. She thought about the man who had shared his food, who had spoken to her like she mattered. No one had done that for her in a long time. She had learned to survive on the streets by hiding, by being invisible. But this act of kindness made her wonder if maybe it was okay to trust, even a little. Maybe not everyone was out to hurt her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if she would find shelter, if she would have enough to eat, or if life would finally give her a break. But for one night, she felt safe. For one night, she felt like someone cared. And sometimes, she thought, that was enough to keep going. A man reached his small apartment, tired and worn, but his spirit lifted by the encounter. He put away the few groceries he had, made a small dinner for his child, and sat down at the table, reflecting on the strange and beautiful moments that could happen even in the hardest of times. He realized that kindness didn't need to be grand or expensive. It could be as simple as sharing a sandwich, offering a coat, or taking the time to see someone as a human being. That night, as he tucked his child into bed, he thought about the girl on the street and hoped she found some warmth and safety. He didn't expect anything in return, didn't even expect to see her again. But the memory of her eyes, wide with surprise and gratitude, stayed with him. It reminded him why he kept going, why he continued to do what he could, no matter how small, to make the world a little kinder. And somewhere down the street, the girl, wrapped in his coat, looked up at the stars peeking through the clouds. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel hope. She didn't know that life had unexpected twists in store for her, that the man who had shown her kindness would soon be a part of a story far bigger than either of them could imagine. But in that moment, she felt seen, she felt safe, and she felt that maybe, just maybe, the world still had some goodness left. The next morning, the man woke up to the sound of his child's laughter. The small apartment smelled faintly of breakfast, and he felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Life didn't get easier, but he had learned to keep moving, step by step, no matter how heavy the load. He prepared a simple breakfast, trying to make it enough for both of them. Every day felt like a test, and he often wondered how long he could keep going. But his child's smile made the struggle worth it. As he finished washing the dishes, his mind drifted back to the girl from the street. He wondered if she had found a place to stay, if she was warm, if someone had helped her. He didn't know her story, and he didn't expect to, but a small part of him hoped that she was okay. He had shared his sandwich and his coat, small gestures. But sometimes small gestures were all a person could offer, and he believed that even small kindness could make a difference. The day passed slowly with work and errands. He noticed small things: a neighbor struggling with groceries, a coworker looking tired, a street musician playing softly in the park. Every face reminded him that people were quietly carrying their own burdens. He thought about how often people walked past each other without seeing, without acknowledging the struggles hidden beneath the surface. He had seen it firsthand too many times, and it made him appreciate moments when kindness broke through. Later that evening, After putting his child to bed, he decided to take a walk to clear his mind. The streets were quieter now, lit by the soft glow of streetlights, and the chill in the air reminded him of the previous night. As he passed the corner near the closed diner, he froze for a moment. There she was, the girl from before, sitting under the same streetlight. But something was different. She looked tired, but there was a spark in her eyes. She had the same coat he had given her, worn but still keeping her warm. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "You're still out here?" he asked softly. She looked up at him, surprised but relieved. "Yeah, I didn't have anywhere else to go," she admitted quietly. He nodded, understanding her without judgment. "Do you want to come eat something? I can buy a warm meal. Not much, but it's better than this." She hesitated, then slowly nodded. They walked to a nearby small diner, the neon lights reflecting on the wet pavement. Inside, the warmth hit them, and the smell of cooking food made their stomachs rumble. They found a quiet corner and sat down. He ordered 2 simple meals, and they ate in silence at first. There was comfort in the quiet, a feeling that they could simply exist without the weight of the world pressing down. After a few bites, he spoke. "You don't have to tell me everything, but if you want someone to listen, I'm here. Sometimes it helps just to talk." She looked at him, her eyes hesitant. I don't really have anyone. Not anymore. People, they just leave or forget about you." He nodded slowly, understanding more than she could know. "I know what that feels like. But even when people leave, there's always someone who notices. Sometimes it's just one person, but that one person can make all the difference." For a long while, they spoke quietly about small things. She shared bits about her day, the things she missed, the moments that hurt. He shared stories about his child, about work, and the little victories that kept him going. It was simple, ordinary conversation, but there was something powerful in it. It was human connection, something neither of them had in abundance. As the evening wore on, they left the diner. The girl's eyes seemed lighter, her movements a little steadier. The coat he had given her seemed to hold more than just warmth. It held a sense of being seen, being cared for. They walked silently for a few blocks, and then he stopped. "You should find a safe place to rest tonight. Maybe a shelter or a friend, somewhere you won't be alone." She shook her head. I don't have anywhere like that. I usually just find a spot that feels safe, even if it's just for a little while." He frowned, worried. "I wish I could do more. But for tonight, at least, you can have my apartment. You can stay there, just for a few hours, to rest and eat something warm." Her eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. "I can't. I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," he said firmly. "Everyone deserves a place to rest. Everyone deserves warmth, even if just for a night." After a few moments, she nodded slowly, realizing the sincerity in his words. They walked back to his small apartment. He gave her a blanket and some simple food, making sure she was comfortable. She sat quietly, eating slowly, and he watched her, feeling a strange mix of concern and hope. There was no judgment here, no questions about her past or her choices. Just care, just humanity. The night passed quietly. He kept his child's routines as normal as possible, and she stayed in a corner of the apartment, wrapped in the blanket, finally allowing herself to rest. It was the first time in a long while that she didn't have to be on guard, the first time she could simply breathe and exist without fear. He noticed the small changes in her demeanor, the way her shoulders relaxed, the way she looked around with a little less caution. It was enough to let him know that he had done the right thing. In the morning, the apartment was quiet again. She had moved slightly in her sleep, and he gently woke her with a warm smile. Time to get ready for the day. We can find something to eat, and then you can decide what you want to do." She nodded, a small smile on her face. It was shy but genuine, and it warmed his heart. They shared a simple breakfast, and he gave her a little bag with food for later, something she could carry if she needed to leave. "This is for you," he said, "just in case you need it. You don't have to be alone all the time. Someone notices." She took it carefully, holding it close. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to repay me," he said firmly. "Kindness isn't about repayment. It's about seeing someone as human, even when it's hard." The morning light spilled into the apartment, casting warmth across the room. They sat quietly for a few moments, both lost in thought. He thought about the struggles ahead, the bills, the work, the responsibilities that never seemed to end. She thought about the streets, the cold nights, the fear she carried with her. Yet, in this small space, they found a moment of peace, a moment of connection. Eventually, she stood up, ready to leave. "I should go," she said softly. "I can't stay forever." He nodded, understanding. "I know. Just remember, someone cares. Don't be afraid to let someone in when you need help." They parted ways with a quiet understanding, a connection that didn't need words. The girl walked down the street, carrying the coat and the small bag of food, feeling a little lighter, a little safer. The man watched her go, hoping she found warmth, safety, and a chance to rest. He didn't know what her future held, and she didn't know his, but in that brief time, they had shared something rare and precious, a moment of human kindness that neither would forget. The man returned to his day, carrying on with work, errands, and the endless responsibilities of being a single parent. Yet there was a new energy in him, a quiet hope that perhaps the world was not as lonely as it sometimes seemed. Small acts of care could ripple in ways no one expected. Sometimes the simple act of sharing a meal, a coat, or a few kind words could change the course of a life. And somewhere on the streets, the girl kept walking with a sense of warmth that went beyond the coat she wore. She thought about the man who had noticed her, who had treated her like a human being instead of an invisible shadow. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a world where kindness existed, where moments like this were possible. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she felt that maybe, just maybe, it could be better than today. Days passed, and the man continued his routine, working hard, taking care of his child, and doing his best to keep their small lives together. Life felt heavy, but he found moments of quiet hope in small gestures. A neighbor waving, a child laughing, a warm cup of tea after a long day. But he often thought about the girl, wondering where she had gone and whether she was still safe. He couldn't shake the feeling that their brief encounter had left a mark on both of their lives. Meanwhile, the girl had returned to the streets, but something had shifted inside her. The kindness the man had shown her stayed with her, warming her from the inside out. She still had to survive, to hide from the world, but now she carried a quiet strength that wasn't there before. She thought about him often, the way he had shared his food without judgment, the way he had looked at her as if her life mattered. It was a strange feeling, hope, mixed with gratitude, something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. What no one knew was that her life was far more complicated than it appeared. Though she lived on the streets now, she was not truly without means. She had inherited thousands of acres of land from a distant relative, land that was tied up in legal disputes and complicated trusts. For years, she had avoided anyone who could take advantage of her or try to control her. The streets had become her refuge, a place where she could hide and think, away from lawyers, relatives, and strangers who might claim her inheritance. Yet, that night on the street, the man's simple act of kindness had made her question her isolation. She realized that not everyone was out to harm her, and that maybe, just maybe, she could trust someone again. She began to consider that life could be different, not necessarily easier, but perhaps full of moments where kindness mattered more than fear. The girl started leaving the streets at night, finding quiet places where she could sleep safely and stay hidden. During the day, she watched the world from a distance, noticing people going about their lives. She saw the struggles and the small victories, the laughter and the tears. She began to see the beauty in ordinary moments, something she had long ignored while consumed by fear and survival. But always, in the back of her mind, was the memory of the man who had treated her with dignity and care. One afternoon, she found herself near the same small diner where they had shared a meal. She hesitated, afraid of being noticed, but she couldn't resist the pull of the memory. She sat on a bench outside, watching the lights flicker inside, remembering the warmth, the conversation, and the small sense of safety she had felt. The memory reminded her of what was possible when someone showed trust and compassion, something she hadn't experienced in years. The man, at the same time, was dealing with the endless challenges of being a single parent. Bills, work, and responsibilities weighed heavily on him, but he found strength in the little moments with his child. The thought of the girl often returned to his mind, though he had no idea where she had gone or if she was safe. He hoped that somehow she had found warmth and shelter, even if briefly. He didn't know that she was still out there, watching the world quietly, considering what her life could become. The girl began to take small steps toward the possibility of a better future. She researched the legal aspects of her inheritance quietly, trying to understand what she owned and how she could protect it. She didn't want wealth or attention. She wanted security and freedom. But she also realized that she had the power to help others, to change lives quietly, as someone had changed hers. She remembered the man's kindness and how it had given her courage. That memory inspired her to think about using her resources not for selfish purposes, but for something meaningful. One evening, she decided to seek him out. She didn't know if he would remember her or welcome her presence, but she felt a deep need to show gratitude. She wanted to see the man who had reminded her of the human capacity for care. She wanted to repay the kindness, not with money or gifts, but with recognition that his small act had mattered immensely. She wandered the streets, following memories, until she found herself near his neighborhood. From a distance, she watched him walk with his child, laughing softly at something small and ordinary. She felt a warmth in her chest, knowing that his life carried the same simple joys and struggles she had observed in her own way. She realized that the world was filled with people quietly carrying burdens, people who often went unnoticed. The man was one of those people, working tirelessly, giving what he could, and remaining steadfast in his humanity. She felt a surge of determination. She wanted to make a difference in someone's life, just as he had made a difference in hers. But she also knew that timing and patience were crucial. She could not rush into his world or disrupt the balance of his life. She had to be careful, thoughtful, and deliberate. Over the next few days, she observed his routine. She learned when he went to work, how he managed his home, and the little things that brought him happiness. She saw his struggles and his moments of triumph, and her respect for him grew. The man was not wealthy, nor was he remarkable in the eyes of the world, but in her eyes he was extraordinary. He had offered her kindness without expectation, a rare and precious gift in a world that often seemed cruel and indifferent. The girl began to understand that her own life, with all its hidden wealth and secrets, was connected to the wider world in ways she had never imagined. She realized that she could use her resources wisely, not to dominate or control, but to support, uplift, and empower others. She thought of the man and his child, of the countless people she might never meet who struggled quietly every day. She wanted to find a way to bridge the gap between her hidden world and the world of ordinary people, to create moments of impact similar to the one she had experienced. One evening, she finally gathered the courage to approach him. She saw him sitting on a bench outside, reading a small book while his child played nearby. She waited, her heart racing, unsure how he would react. When he looked up and met her eyes, there was a flicker of recognition. He remembered her, the girl from the street who had shared a meal and a moment of trust with him. He smiled gently, nodding in acknowledgement. She approached slowly, keeping her voice calm. I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "For the other night. For the meal, the coat. Everything. You don't know how much it meant to me." He looked at her, surprised but touched. "You're welcome," he replied. "I hope you've been okay since then." She nodded. "I have. It changed something in me. I realized that kindness exists, even when the world feels against you. You reminded me that people can care, and that we don't have to face life alone all the time." He nodded slowly, understanding. "I'm glad. Sometimes the smallest gestures can matter more than we think." For the first time in years, the girl allowed herself to feel the possibility of trust, of connection, of hope. She had spent so long hiding, avoiding the world, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. The man had reminded her, in the simplest way, that she mattered. And now she wanted to honor that. Not with grand gestures or wealth, but with attention, care, and understanding. They sat together for a while, talking quietly, sharing small stories about their days, and finding comfort in the simplicity of human connection. It was a moment neither of them could have predicted, a meeting of two lives shaped by struggle and resilience, brought together by something as simple as a shared meal and a coat. It was not a story of wealth, fame, or extraordinary power. It was a story of humanity, of seeing each other, and of recognizing that even the smallest acts could have profound effects. As the night approached, the girl stood to leave, but she felt lighter, stronger, and more connected to the world. The man watched her go, feeling a quiet hope that somehow their encounter had created ripples beyond what either of them could measure. Both of them returned to their lives, carrying the memory of that evening, knowing that the world could be harsh, but that it could also be tender, generous, and full of quiet miracles for those willing to see them. Weeks passed, and the man continued his daily struggles with work, bills, and caring for his child. Life felt heavy as ever, but he found small moments of joy in the laughter of his child, in a shared joke with a neighbor, or in the quiet satisfaction of a day's work done. Yet there were nights when exhaustion hit him deeply, when the weight of responsibilities felt almost too much to bear. He worried constantly about the future, about whether he could provide stability for his child, and whether the small victories of today would be enough to make a difference tomorrow. Meanwhile, the girl had been thinking more and more about the man who had once shared a meal with her. The simple act of kindness had left a lasting impression, and she realized that her life on the streets, though necessary for survival, was lonely in ways she had not allowed herself to see. She had inherited immense land and resources, things she had hidden from the world to protect herself. But now she saw that she could use some of what she had to make a real difference in someone's life. She didn't want recognition, and she didn't want fame. She wanted to help quietly, in ways that mattered. Her thoughts returned to the man, and she decided to reach out. She researched quietly, making sure her approach would not alarm or overwhelm him. She learned more about his life, his routines, and the struggles he faced every day. She realized that he was carrying a heavy load alone, and her heart went out to him. She wanted to make sure that the help she offered would actually benefit him, and not cause disruption or discomfort. One late afternoon, she approached the man's neighborhood cautiously. She found him outside, helping his child with homework on a small bench, the sunlight soft on the pavement. She took a deep breath, feeling nervous but determined. He looked up, and their eyes met. Recognition flickered in his expression, followed by a warm smile. I wanted to see you," she said quietly. "I wanted to thank you again, and I think I can help. You've been so kind to me, and I don't want to forget that." He looked at her, a mixture of surprise and concern crossing his face. "Help me. I don't understand." "You've done nothing wrong. You've helped yourself just by being here." She shook her head. "I mean real help. I know things have been hard for you. I've been watching, and I see the effort you put in every day. I can't ignore that. I want to give you some support, not to change who you are, but to make things a little easier for you and your child." He hesitated, unsure how to respond. He had always been independent, proud of the life he had built despite the struggles. Accepting help from someone, especially someone he barely knew, felt strange. But he also saw the sincerity in her eyes, the quiet determination that reminded him of the kindness she had shown him before. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said cautiously. "I'll listen." They walked together to a quiet spot, and she explained her situation. She told him that she had inherited land and resources, things she had hidden from the world for her safety. She explained that she wanted to help him, not out of obligation, but because she had seen his humanity and felt that it deserved to be recognized and supported. She made it clear that she wasn't looking for gratitude or fame. She simply wanted to make a positive difference. The man listened carefully, absorbing every word. It was hard to comprehend at first, the scale of what she was offering. Yet he could see that her intentions were genuine, and he felt a mix of awe, disbelief, and cautious hope. He realized that the kindness he had shown her months ago had come full circle in a way he had never imagined. He didn't respond immediately, choosing instead to process the information and understand what accepting this help would mean for his life. After a long moment, he spoke. "I appreciate what you're offering, truly. I've never had much, but I've worked hard to provide what I can. I don't want to take anything that isn't earned, or that feels like charity." She smiled softly. "It's not charity. It's a recognition of the humanity we all share. You didn't know it at the time, but your kindness changed something in me. I want to return that, in a way that makes a real difference for you. You don't have to feel guilty or unworthy. I just want to help." Slowly, the man began to see the possibilities. With her help, he could provide a better home for his child, take care of medical needs that had been postponed, and give his child opportunities he had only dreamed of. He didn't feel embarrassed or ashamed. He felt relief, a weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, he could imagine a future with less fear, less constant struggle. Over the next few weeks, they worked quietly together. She offered practical support resources to stabilize their living situation, assistance with bills, and connections to professionals who could help with long-term security. She never imposed, never demanded gratitude, and never sought attention. She simply wanted to see him thrive. The man, in turn, remained humble, hardworking, and deeply grateful, never letting the help diminish his pride or his sense of responsibility. During this time, they grew closer in an unusual but profound way. It wasn't a romantic connection, though there was mutual respect and warmth. It was the kind of bond that forms between people who see each other clearly, who recognize the struggles and triumphs of another's life, and who act with compassion. They shared small moments of joy, a child's laughter, a successful day at work, a simple meal together. These moments became the foundation of trust and understanding between them. One day, the girl surprised him by offering something more than material support. She had been working behind the scenes to secure a quiet legal path for her land and resources. making sure that his family could benefit without complications or public scrutiny. She wanted him to have stability and security without feeling like charity, and she worked carefully to ensure that the help would be sustainable and respectful of his independence. He was deeply touched. He realized that kindness, when genuine, could manifest in unexpected ways. The girl had transformed her own struggles and experiences into something positive, using her resources to create safety and opportunity for someone else. It was a lesson in humanity, one that went far beyond money or material help. It was about recognizing worth, giving dignity, and making life a little easier for someone carrying burdens alone. As time went on, the man and his child began to see real change in their lives. Their home was more secure, the daily pressures eased, and there was room for moments of joy and peace. He didn't take the help for granted. He continued to work hard, provide care, and teach his child the values of kindness, resilience, and gratitude. But he also learned that accepting help was not weakness. It could be a bridge to new opportunities and a way to honor the humanity of those who cared. One evening, they all sat together quietly, the girl, the man, and his child. The child looked at her curiously, sensing that she had played a role in changing their lives in ways that were mysterious yet significant. The man felt a deep sense of gratitude and humility. He realized that life had a way of connecting people in unexpected ways, that small acts of kindness could ripple outward and transform lives in ways no one could foresee. The girl, for her part, felt a quiet satisfaction. She had found a way to turn her own hidden wealth and complicated life into something meaningful. She had honored the man's simple act of kindness in the most profound way she could. She had not sought recognition, and she had not sought control. She had simply acted from a place of empathy and respect. And in doing so, she had created a bond that neither time nor circumstance could break. The story of their lives had changed, but not because of grand gestures or dramatic events. It had changed because of human connection, because of kindness offered without expectation, because of trust given when it was difficult, and because of the courage to accept help when it was offered with sincerity. The man learned that even in struggle, there was hope. The girl learned that even wealth and power were most meaningful when used to help others. Together, they discovered that life could be transformed by simple acts of care, moments of recognition, and the courage to see and honor one another. And as the night fell, they sat together quietly, feeling a sense of peace and possibility. The man looked at his child, the girl at the simple home they shared, and both of them felt that the world, though often harsh and unforgiving, could also be filled with compassion, understanding, and quiet miracles. They had discovered that the smallest gestures, sharing a meal, offering a coat, showing kindness without judgment, could lead to the greatest changes. And in that, they found hope, safety, and the knowledge that humanity, when lived fully and openly, could change lives forever. Months had passed since the girl had first offered her quiet support, and the man's life had begun to change in ways he had never imagined. The constant pressure of bills and uncertainty had eased, giving him the space to focus not just on survival, but on growth, on providing a fuller life for his child. Their small apartment had become a place of warmth and stability, a home where laughter returned, and the shadows of struggle seemed less heavy. His child noticed the changes, though too young to fully understand them. There were new books, new toys, and small treats that brought joy to everyday life. But most importantly, there was a sense of security that had been missing for so long. The man watched this with a mixture of gratitude and humility, knowing that the difference came from someone he had never expected, someone whose kindness had come full circle in the most unexpected way. The girl continued to be part of their lives quietly. She never imposed, never demanded, and never sought recognition. She visited often, sometimes to help with practical matters, sometimes just to share a meal or a story. The child had grown fond of her, sensing her gentle presence and warmth. For the man, she became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there were people who cared deeply without expectation. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, the girl brought news that would deepen the impact of her kindness even further. She had completed arrangements to legally ensure that the man and his child would have long-term security. Housing, education, and medical needs were now stabilized, not as charity, but as a thoughtful plan to make their lives better. She explained it carefully, emphasizing that it was not a gift to be flaunted or shared publicly, but a private act meant to honor the humanity they had shown one another. The man listened quietly, feeling overwhelmed, but deeply grateful. He wanted to express thanks in words, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he simply nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek as he realized the depth of her generosity. It was a gesture that went beyond material help. It was respect, recognition, and a profound understanding of struggle. He finally understood that kindness could transform lives in ways that were lasting and meaningful. Over time, the girl began to reveal more of herself, though carefully and slowly. She had inherited a vast estate, thousands of acres that she had managed alone to protect from those who would exploit her. She had lived in hiding for years, navigating legal battles and family disputes, and yet she chose to remain humble, using her position not for power, but for good. The man marveled at her strength, resilience, and quiet wisdom. He realized that sometimes the people who seemed most vulnerable were actually the ones with extraordinary courage and insight. Life continued to shift in small, but significant ways. The child grew with stability and happiness. The apartment became a home filled with laughter, and the man's daily burdens were eased without diminishing his sense of responsibility. He worked hard, not because he had to, but because he wanted to, and because he now had the space to dream of a better future. He saw opportunities for growth and connection that he had never imagined before. The girl also found peace. She had lived so long in hiding that she had forgotten what it felt like to connect with others without fear. Through her relationship with the man and his child, she experienced trust, care, and simple joy. She realized that her wealth and resources were most meaningful when used to make life better for those around her. She had not sought attention, recognition, or reward. She had simply acted from a place of empathy and humanity, and the results had been profound. One day, the three of them took a walk in a nearby park. The child ran ahead, laughing and playing freely, while the man and the girl walked together, talking quietly. They shared memories of the past months, recalling small victories, moments of kindness, and lessons learned. The man spoke about the challenges he had faced as a single parent, and the girl shared her reflections on the power of compassion and empathy. There was no need for dramatic gestures. The simple act of walking together, of being present, was enough to show the depth of their bond. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the park, the man reflected on the journey they had all taken. He had faced immense challenges, yet he had also experienced profound human connection. The girl had transformed her own hidden life into something meaningful, and he had learned that accepting help when it is offered with sincerity is not a weakness, but a way to honor the trust and care of others. The child ran back to them, holding wildflowers gathered along the path. The man smiled and took the flowers, placing them gently in a small vase at home. The girl laughed softly, seeing the joy in such a simple gesture. It was a reminder that happiness often comes from the small, quiet moments, the acts of care and attention that go unnoticed by the larger world. Evening settled in, and the three of them returned to their apartment. The man prepared a simple dinner, and they ate together, sharing stories and laughter. It was ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in meaning. They had all been touched by the ripple effects of kindness, the meal shared on a cold night, the coat offered without expectation, the trust given when it was hard. These moments had shaped their lives, creating stability, connection, and a sense of hope that had been missing for far too long. As the night drew on, the man tucked his child into bed, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and peace. He looked at the girl, who was quietly organizing a small shelf of books for the child, and he realized that the world, though often difficult and unpredictable, could also be filled with quiet heroes. People who saw others, acted without expectation, and changed lives in ways that were lasting and meaningful. The girl looked at the man, sensing his gratitude and humility. She didn't need acknowledgement or thanks. The bond they shared was its own reward. She had acted from compassion and empathy, and the results had been profound. The man's life was now steadier, happier, and full of opportunity. And the child would grow up with a foundation of security, love, and the understanding that kindness is a force that can shape the world. In the quiet of the apartment, they shared a moment of reflection. The man realized that the world could be cruel, but it could also be gentle, forgiving, and full of human connection. The girl understood that her resources were powerful tools for good, but that their greatest value lay in the way they could touch lives quietly and meaningfully. The child, sensing the love and stability around them, felt safe and joyful, experiencing a world of possibility and hope. The story ended not with grand declarations or dramatic events, but with a quiet sense of fulfillment and connection. The man had learned that his efforts and kindness mattered. The girl had discovered that her life, though complicated and full of hidden challenges, could be a source of good for others. And the child had a stable, loving environment in which to grow, learn, and thrive. The world, though imperfect, had shown them that human kindness, when given and received sincerely, could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. One meal shared, one coat offered, one act of trust and empathy had transformed 3 lives, creating hope, stability, and the understanding that humanity is at its best when we see each other, care for each other, and act with compassion. And in that quiet, extraordinary truth, they found the peace, safety, and hope that would carry them forward for the rest of their lives.